Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different because as you can see, we're on Linux today. We're not in a Windows virtual machine, we're not on Windows 10 or XP or anything like that. We are on Ubuntu Linux, and that's because we're going to be checking out a program called PlayOnLinux, which allows you to run Windows programs on your Linux system. Now for those of you Linux users out there, you probably have heard of this program before. If you haven't, you probably have at least heard of Wine, and what Wine is a program that allows you to run Windows programs on Linux. It's essentially the same concept, but the thing that makes PlayOnLinux different is it's not a program by itself that allows you to run Windows applications on Linux. It is a front end for Wine, essentially a more graphical and easier to navigate user interface for Wine that just makes the program easier to use. It makes it easier to install programs and configure your Wine settings. We're going to be checking it out today, trying to run a couple of Windows programs on Linux and see how it performs. Now to download PlayOnLinux, there's a couple of ways to do it. I would recommend going over to the main website, which is playonlinux.com, because this is where you can get information about the project, what it is and what it does. You can click on this little listing right here and it'll tell you what PlayOnLinux is, what its features are, and they do state right out that PlayOnLinux is based on Wine and so it profits from all of its features, yet it keeps the user from having to deal with its complexity. And this statement right here just really sums up what PlayOnLinux is. So if you want to download it, you can click on this download link right here and go over to the main download page, because you can download it from here. Like I'm on Ubuntu, I can click on the Ubuntu listing right here and I can download the deb file here. But what you can also do, and if you're using another distro that has a app store like Ubuntu has, or the Ubuntu software store, it very well could have PlayOnLinux in it, and that's exactly how I got PlayOnLinux on my Ubuntu installation here. It was in the App Store, or the Ubuntu software store. I just went in here, did a search for it, and downloaded it. So this also gives you some more information about it here, and there are some user ratings in here if you want to read those. So there are, as you can see, there's a lot of 1-star ratings because this program does not allow you to run every Windows program on Linux. This is not some magical program that you can take any Windows like piece of software and run it on Linux. That's just not what it is. It does allow you to run certain Windows programs, but not all, as we're going to be seeing in this video. So when you download PlayOnLinux and install it, this is what the interface looks like. So I'm going to minimize out of Firefox here. So this is the main interface for PlayOnLinux. Now the really nice thing about PlayOnLinux that makes it different from Wine's front end is there is a installer, kind of like a repository almost, of a ton of different applications. You can click on this install button right here and it brings up this PlayOnLinux install menu, and here you have a ton of Windows applications that have been tested with PlayOnLinux. And you can see some of these, the ones that are in red here, are programs that are still being tested. If you uncheck this testing box here, all of those will go away. So those programs you can't really, and when you enable it here, it will kind of give you a warning. There's also stuff about DRM and copy protection. By enabling this option, you can install programs that employ digital rights management copy protection that are not supported by PlayOnLinux and might need to be bypassed. This feature should not be construed as implicit or implied condoning of piracy, and as such, we don't offer any support for issues resulting from using this option. So yeah, that's kind of a legal disclaimer there. It just kind of points that out, which is very important to state. But yeah, all of these programs in red, you're essentially not going to be able to contact them to like get support for or ask them to fix a bug or something like that. But the majority of the programs in here are not in red, which means that they have been tested with PlayOnLinux. But just because they've been tested with PlayOnLinux doesn't necessarily mean that they work with it in every circumstance, and it can be kind of hit or miss, and in my case it's been pretty much a miss. I've tried to install multiple different programs and every single one of them has failed to execute. You can see that I even tried to install Internet Explorer 8 which is the best use for Play on Linux ever, I think we can all agree, is installing Microsoft Internet Explorer on Linux, because that's what every Linux user wants to do. So the install menu, it's very nice because it's split up into these categories. So you've got accessories, development, education, games, graphics, internet, multimedia, office, other, and patches. So patches are obviously just going to be, these aren't going to be programmed, like entire programs are going to be patches to existing programs. But one of the things that you probably, if you are interested in running Windows programs on Linux, you're probably interested in running games on Linux, right? Because that's one of the things that gaming on Linux has definitely improved in recent years, but historically, Linux has not been very good for PC gaming. Windows is definitely the dominant operating system for gamers, and it probably will be for a while. But that doesn't mean that you cannot run games on Linux. In fact, there are many games that have been ported over to Linux initially from Windows. But for those games that have not been ported to Linux, Play on Linux really comes in handy. So you can scroll through here, there's all these different games, and yes, you can install these. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to like download the entire game from here and play it without actually owning the game yourself. That would technically be software piracy, and Play on Linux, the developers of Play on Linux, do not condone that. So what they've done is there are certain games that are freeware or have been released as freeware that were once paid. For example, a great example of that would be Command and Conquer. Command & Conquer Red Alert 1 specifically was released a while ago as freeware, as noted in this little description here. So to show you how this process works, we're going to install Command & Conquer Red Alert 1, or at least attempt to, because I tried to do this and unfortunately it does not work in my case. But let me just show you what happens. So when you find a game or an application that you want to click on the install button in the bottom right corner, and this is one of those programs that is in testing, so I just got out of it there. But if you notice, when I clicked on it, that was one of those programs that was highlighted in red. So this is one of those testing programs that is not, you're not really going to be able to contact them about fixing bugs or anything like that. And what it will do for every application that you want to install with Play on Linux, you're going to get a very similar, a very Windows-esque installation prompt here. And this is the Play on Linux installation wizard. So the first thing it has you do is it tells you to please read this, and it tells you what is going to happen during a Play on Linux installation. So it tells you to leave the default install directory unchanged, just make sure to install it to the C drive, which is the only one managed by Play on Linux. Check in the wiki how you can manage the host system disk space. If asked, don't let the installer launch the newly installed program for you at the end of the installation. If asked if you wish to reboot Windows immediately, you may answer yes, but in no case should you reboot the host operating system by yourself. And you can, this is kind of cut off here, but you can check don't remind me again if you don't want to see this for every program that you install. But we're just going to click on next, and it also has this disclaimer here that says that Play on Linux is not related to Wine HQ. Again, this is based on Wine, but it's not developed by the same people. And because of that, the developers of Play on Linux ask you to not contact Wine's developers for issues that you have with Play on Linux, because you definitely would not get anywhere. So when you click next, this will then bring up the installation wizard specific to the application that you selected, and it tells you where it's going to install it. Now, the nice thing about Play on Linux is it essentially creates or installs multiple instances of Wine for each application that you install. It's not going to be like a system-wide Wine installation like you would have if you install Wine. And to show you what I mean by that, if we go to the file manager here, in your home folder, there'll be this shortcut to Play on Linux's virtual drives, and these are all, you can see, these are all the programs that I tried to install. So we got Red Alert, Windows Media Player 10, IE8, even Creative Cloud, and Call of Duty 2. And for each one of these, if we go in here, there's going to be a drive C, which is essentially creating or mimicking the structure of the C drive in Windows, which just allows whatever program that's being installed to know where to put all of its files. But each one of these applications gets its own drive C folder. So I can go into Creative Cloud here, and here's its drive C folder just for it, with Half-Life 2, which I tried to install, and this is kind of an example of a bit of a redundancy with PlayOnLinux, and we'll kind of talk about that in a moment. So that is how PlayOnLinux structures itself, and for each application that you install, that's what you're going to get. See, this is what I was kind of talking about, where like you're not going to be able to just think, oh, I'm going to go on this thing and just download whatever game that I want, just get it for free if it's a paid game. Even though that this is it's freeware now. It wasn't before, but even though that it's now freeware, PlayOnLinux still requires you to get the ISO image from EA instead of just providing it here for you, because I don't really think they could do that. Maybe they could, but they don't do it in this case. So when you click on next, it will ask you for, well, first it's going to download a exe file. You can see this is a patch file. And then this is what happened right here, that I didn't even get to get to the screen where it's going to ask me to put in the CD, because it fails to download this ddraw.dll file from whatever web server that it's downloading this from. And one of the other things that I was briefly mentioning before is there are certain games and programs as well that are in PlayOnLinux that are now able to be run natively on Linux, and Half-Life 2 is one of them, and Steam. There's Steam in here. If I do a search for Steam, here's Steam right here. You can do a search for Half-Life 2. So you've got Half-Life 2, both of the episodes, Lost Coast and Blue Shift, and like they're in here, but all of these games work natively on Linux now. Valve has developed ports of them, so you can play all these games natively on Linux if you own them in your Steam library. So you could just download Steam from Valve directly, install the game, and play it that way, and it will work much better because it's running natively rather than through Wine like it would here. Now you might be wondering, okay, well what if I want to install an application that's not in this list here? Well, that's what this install a non-listed program option is for. This allows you to install a program that you might have on a CD, or you have a setup.exe file for that you want to install it on Linux. This allows you to possibly do that. Now, what programs are we going to try to install? Well, to give this video a bit of an MJD feel, we've got a few applications that we've taken a look at on this channel before. We've got Full Tilt Pinball, which this was mentioned in the 3D Pinball Space Cadet retrospective video, the Microsoft Entertainment Pack, this is the best of pack, SimCity 3000 is the only one in here that I haven't done a full video on, Soft RAM, of course, we're going to try to double our memory, guys, and we have Microshaft Windblows 98. So yeah, these are the 5 programs we're going to be trying out. Now to choose one of those programs to install, you have to click next on this wizard here, and the option you want to choose is install a program in a new virtual drive. So we'll click on next. You want to type a name for the application's virtual drive. So we'll start with Full Tilt Pinball, so we'll just call it Pinball, and click on next. We're just going to uncheck all of these for now, as it says. If you don't know, unselect all, just to kind of keep it simple for now. We're just going to do that. Click on next. And now it tells you what kind of drive do you want to create, 32-bit or 64-bit. Well, these are all going to be 32-bit programs. Well, some of them are going to be 16-bit programs like SoftRAM, but we're going to create a 32-bit Windows installation. So we'll do that. It's going to create a virtual drive. And then here comes up Wine here. So this is where it starts to load Wine. It tells you what it's going to do, the Wine configuration in, and then it lists the directory. So it points to the pinball directory. It says that it's being updated. And this is going to be essentially the same process for each application that you install. And this is where it asks you to specify the location of the install file. So we'll click on Browse, and it's in my Documents folder, Full Tilt, and it's setup32.exe. So we'll open that, click on Next, and now PlayOnLinux is going to install the application. And you can see that we immediately get a setup initialization error. So this is where Wine begins to load. This looks very Windows-like, right? Very Windows 2000/XP-like. So this is essentially displaying a Windows error message right now. It's saying it's unable to find a setup.dll, which is needed to complete the installation. So it wasn't able to find that. I wonder if I chose the wrong... now see, PlayOnLinux thinks that it installed, and this is kind of because again, Wine is a separate program. So what it did is it essentially just called Wine and said, hey, we have to install this program, so can you do that? And Wine came up and tried to do that, but failed. But PlayOnLinux thinks that since Wine closed, that it installed successfully. It's not really able to tell that, oh, that there was a problem. So it thinks that it has installed totally fine, so we're just going to go through the installation, and we can't go back or anything like that. So it tells you, please choose a file for PlayOnLinux to make a shortcut. We'll just say no. and there. So that is essentially the manual installation wizard. So it closed out of that, but it didn't install anything. So we're going to go through this again, and we're going to try to choose another, so we'll install a new virtual drive. That was setup 32. We'll try maxis.exe. I'm not sure if this is, I mean, I would think setup 32, program setup 32 is missing or damaged. So this definitely wouldn't happen under Windows. I mean, I installed this in Windows 98 or Windows 95, and it worked totally fine. But in this case, it's just not working with PlayOnLinux. So we've got the Microsoft Entertainment Pack. Now this is essentially an already installed copy of the Microsoft Entertainment Pack, so there's no setup file. So instead of going through that whole setup process for each one of these executable files, what we can do is click on this configure button right here, click on new, and this will create a new virtual drive. So we're going to do a 32-bit Windows installation, and now it's going to ask you which version of Wine would you like to use. So these are the multiple versions that are installed. We're just going to choose System, and we're going to choose the name of the virtual drive. We'll just call this MSEP for Microsoft Entertainment Pack. Now it's going to create the virtual drive, so it'll call upon Wine again. Wine will do its thing. And now, since it's not going to run an executable file, it will just close out of it, and that's all there is to it. So now what we can do is we're going to just copy this folder here. So Control C, we're going to go back to our home folder, go into MSEP, drive C, and we're just going to paste this here. And then I can make shortcuts for all those games. So I can go in here, and what it will do is display a list of all of the exe files in that folder. So let's say I want to make a shortcut for Tetris. I can click on Next, I can name it Tetris, and now that will create a shortcut in the PlayOnLinux launcher here to launch Tetris. So you are able to create shortcuts for applications that are already installed. So that is nice. And it will just continue on with this. Like I just did one shortcut. Let's say I want to make one for Jazzball. We'll do Next, name it Jazzball, and it will create that, and then it will scan the virtual drive again, and it'll do this until you click on cancel. So the next application we have to take a look at is SimCity 3000. And SimCity 3000, this specific copy that I have, is another already installed copy. So this just has the game executable right here. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the Entertainment Pack, and first we're going to go to PlayOnLinux and create a new virtual drive here. So we're going to click on New. We're going to choose 32-bit. We're going to do Wine version 4.0.3, and we're going to call this SC3K just to keep it simple. And now it's going to create the virtual drive. Now what we have to do is once it creates this, so here's Wine coming back up here, we're going to copy this folder. So I'm going to copy SimCity 3000. Once it's created, which it looks like it is, well, Wine just closed, so PlayOnLinux should close here momentarily. And we should be able to go, so there it did. So we'll go back to home here, PlayOnLinux virtual drives, and SC3K drive C, and we're just going to copy this to the root of the C drive once again. And what we're going to do is configure the Wine settings to basically have it specify a specific Windows version to use. Now, you can do this during the, like, if you click on install and go through that process, there will be a point where it will ask you if you want to configure Wine. And if you were to select that, it would bring up this window right here. So you can also do it by going into the, selecting the virtual drive from here and then clicking on configure Wine. This will come up with this window right here. Now this here, just like that error message we got before, looks very much like a Windows 2000 or Windows XP window. We've got a very similar looking interface, but this is Wine once again. But what we can do is under this applications tab here, we can choose the Windows version that we want it to imitate. So this is SimCity 3000. We're going to choose Windows XP. We're going to try this again with Pinball, with Full Tilt Pinball, because you guys saw in that earlier clip we weren't able to get that running. And we're going to try to change the Windows version on that as well. So we're going to click OK. And now we should be able to go through the same make a shortcut wizard that we did for the Microsoft Entertainment Pack. And here it auto-populates with sc3.exe, so we'll do that. Click on Next, and that will create a shortcut for us to launch that program. So you see it came up in here, created a shortcut on the desktop. All of these, by the way, when you create shortcuts, they also show up on the desktop as well, which is pretty nice. So we're done with that. We're going to close out it. We'll just minimize this here, and we'll try to run SimCity and see what happens. And so it just changed the screen resolution, and you can see that it says wine exception encountered is ready. It looks like that it's, yes, it encountered a exception, although we can't really see it here. So it did a few things. It changed the screen resolution for one. It tried to load the game. You can see that there's this like black window, which is, you know, supposed to be the game, because this does run in full screen. But we do have this exception encountered error, and we can't really view it. We can Alt-Tab, and yeah, but we're not actually going to be able to see the window, so we're just going to have to quit this manually. So we get this sad face error message right here. It kind of tells you SC3 crash, selected shortcut, click on debug to get more details. So what we might be able to do is go back into the wine settings. It could be something with the resolution. Oh, I think we've got two windows opened up here. Yeah, so we'll go back into wine and open up the wine configuration. But you can see that there's also some other Windows programs in here. Now again, each of these wine configurations for each of these programs, they're each going to have their own configuration panel, their own registry editor, Windows reboot, all of this stuff. So this is not going to affect every single application that we've installed here. But we're going to go to graphics here, and I want to uncheck. Let's see, allow the window manager. We're going to uncheck this, emulate a virtual desktop, and we'll try that. I don't see anything about like running a full screen application in a window, but we'll try emulate a virtual desktop and we'll see what that does. But while we're in here, I will also show you some of these other functions that you have. So you can open up the registry editor, and because I checked enable virtual desktop in the wine configuration panel, it opens up this wine desktop window with the registry editor opened inside of that, instead of, you know, showing it in its own individual window like with the wine configuration panel before. It doesn't look exactly the same. It's obviously not the exact same program, but it provides the same functionality. So this kind of behaves more like a virtual machine would, although wine is obviously more integrated with the host operating system. Now I also tried to, with this virtual desktop option enabled, I tried to launch SimCity 3000, and unfortunately that did not solve the problem either, although we were able to see that same exception encountered error message, but it still did not allow us to run the game. So yeah, that is unfortunate. We're definitely having some problems with SimCity 3, but what I want to do is go back into configure here, since we have, or actually do we even have, yeah, we still have the pinball drive here, but since we already have the drive, we can just go into the wine settings. We can go to configure wine and have it launch the configuration tool, and we'll try to change this. Okay, so it's on Windows 95. I think I may have set that off camera. I believe we have to, yeah, run an exe file in this virtual drive and just manually specify. Now we could just create a whole new virtual drive. We can do that, but we'll just try to run this setup program here and see if, no, so it's going to do the exact same thing. So that is unfortunate. You could have also just gone into install a non-listed program, and then choose edit or update an existing application, and then this would allow you to choose, you would choose the virtual drive, and we choose pinball, and then you could choose configure wine, and then you can basically go through the entire setup process again. But what we're going to do is install Microshaft. We're going to try to get Microshaft Winblows 98 to work properly. So we're going to install a program in a new virtual drive, and we'll call this Winblows, and we will configure wine. We're going to manually specify Windows 98, 32-bit installation. It's going to create the virtual drive, so it's going to call up wine once again. So this is what I was talking about before, where if you select that option during an application installation, like during this process, it will come up with that same wine configuration window that we accessed before. So here we can change the version. Let's do Windows 98. That's what I ran it on in my full video, so we'll click OK. And now PlayOnLinux will ask you to specify the location of the setup file. So we'll go back to our documents. This is under Winblows. Now this is this is right off of the Microshaft CD. So we have a setup file. It's down here towards the bottom here. So here's setup.exe. So we'll open that, click next, and we'll see if this works. Nope, it's unable to initialize the language dialog box. Now, this we may be able to fix because what we can do is install the fonts. So we'll say I don't want to make another shortcut. A lot of these applications obviously rely on Microsoft fonts, which Linux does not have. So we can install those manually by going into this configuration menu once again. Now, if an application in the install menu requires the fonts, PlayOnLinux will usually install it for you, or it'll at least prompt you if you want to install it. But we can do it manually by going into here, and we didn't get the application installed once again, so it didn't install anything on the virtual drive, but we still have the virtual drive right here. So we can select it and go to install components, and we can scroll down here, and well, here's Microsoft Core Fonts, so we'll install, and it still is not able to initialize the language dialog box. So that is unfortunate. We have, I believe we've got SoftRAM. Let's try out SoftRAM. So we will install non-listed program. Next, install a program in a new virtual drive, and we're going to call this SoftRAM. This one, come on, this one has to work. And we'll configure wine 32-bit. Now this is a 16-bit application. But so are the Microsoft Entertainment Pack games, and those work totally fine. Actually, I didn't even change the Windows version, but we'll just change this to Windows 95, since this is a Windows 95 application, so we'll change that. And we'll go back into Documents, SoftRAM, Setup.exe, unable to start installation program for SoftRAM 95. Well, we got the preparing SoftRAM 95 setup, so that just completely crashed. Oh my gosh. We're about to double our memory here on Linux, guys. We want to install to the default directory. Oh my gosh, this is actually working. Creating program folder and icons. Setup has detected that you have 2,097,151K of extended RAM. What did I give this VM? This has 4 gigs of RAM, so that's what it's displaying it as. So this is the screen that we saw in each of these programs that we tried to install, but since none of them installed successfully, we couldn't really do anything with it. What this allows you to do is have PlayOnLinux create a shortcut for this program that you just installed. So it has you choose the executable file. So it lists essentially all the files that it installed, or that, well, the wine installed for us. So we're going to choose the executable, which is softram.exe, and click on next, and we'll just capitalize SoftRAM, that's how it's capitalized for the program, so we'll click next. So let's try to run SoftRAM, everybody. So we're going to double click on this, or I guess we have to click run. Oh my gosh. It's enabled. Yeah, we got 0 kilobytes of virtual memory. SoftRAM has been disabled. We're going to enable it. Go to our super simple options menu. We're going to have this stay on top, that's for sure. And I want to allocate 50% of hard RAM for SoftRAM. So will this window actually stay on top? Wow, it will actually stay on top. That's cool. That is cool. So and this is again a setting from within SoftRAM. This is not like a wine setting, like opening up the wine configuration settings. So that is cool. So it will actually stay on top even in Linux here. So to all of you Linux users out there who never got to experience the power of SoftRAM, well, now you can. You can get double your memory, guys. Can you believe it? No, this is a total scam. If you guys didn't see my SoftRAM retrospective video, it kind of goes into the whole story of how this is a software program. For those of you who don't know, this is a software program that claimed to double your memory through nothing but a software application. This didn't do anything. It didn't even attempt to do anything. It was a total scam. And I did a whole retrospective video on that if you want to check that one out. But so we got at least one of these programs to work. I mean, we got the Microsoft Entertainment Packs or the games from that to work as well. But yeah, guys, that is PlayOnLinux. That is how it works. That's what it's all about. And I think this is a really cool program. And hey, to all of you Linux users out there who are interested in running some Windows programs on your computer, definitely check out PlayOnLinux. It's definitely worth a shot. Again, you can't expect every single Windows program to work with it, but it's worth a try to just see if that Windows program that you have lying around might work with it, because it might. I mean, you saw we had a couple programs that we tried out here today that worked with it, which is pretty awesome. So that's going to end it off for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, definitely be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to get subscribed down below and turn on those channel notifications if you haven't already, to get notified whenever I upload a new video, which I do multiple times every single week on this channel. And as always, guys, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.